All right, guys, welcome back to Falcon Central Radio on the Pro Football Central Radio Network. I am one of your hosts, Aaron Freeman, joined by my co-host Scott Korazic. Today, we are previewing the up-and-coming rematch between Super Bowl 51 between the Atlanta Falcons and the New England Patriots. Hopefully, we will be joined by some guests to help us do that. We will also be recapping the Falcons' Week 6 loss to the Miami Dolphins, as well as answering your guys' mailbag questions at the end of the show. So, Scott, let's start things off with what we normally do each week, talking roster moves, and then we'll move into the Dolphins game, and if we can get our guests, then we'll pivot to the Patriots, just the usual order. But the Falcons made a bunch of practice squad moves. You know us on this show, we love talking about practice squad moves. But prominently last week, the Falcons brought Marvin Hall up from the practice squad. He had a big touchdown catch in the Dolphins. Pretty outstanding debut for him as a Falcon in the regular season. But to make room for him, they wound up cutting Brian Hill, the Falcons' fifth-round pick, the running back. Hadn't been playing a whole lot this year, but they were able to put him on the practice squad officially today. They also made some other shuffles with the practice squad, picking up quarterback Garrett Grayson, a former Saint. They picked up a defensive end, Jonathan Woodard, last week. They signed Florida Gator, former Florida Gator defensive tackle Joey Ivy. To make room for those guys, they wound up cutting Trevor Knight, the quarterback they picked up from Arizona at the beginning of the season, and they also cut kicker Mike Meyer, who was just picked up this past week on the practice squad. What are your thoughts on these moves? I know we'll probably talk a little bit about Hall's performance in the Dolphins game, but you know,
running backs that often. I do also think Marvin Hall getting elevated was because the team was trying to poach him. So the Falcons elevated him because they were like, hey, we're going to keep Marvin Hall and we're going to use Marvin Hall, as opposed to just Brian Hill being out there. And I also wonder what it means long-term for Nick Williams, whether Nick Williams is going to get cut or not.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an interesting question. I do think from an upside standpoint, Marvin Hall has a lot more potential that's worthy of developing. The way the Falcons sort of use Nick Williams is as a slot receiver. Nick Williams is a fine NFL pro. He's been, this is his third year in Atlanta. He contributes on special teams. He does his job when he's ever out in the field, and he always seems to make those one or two catches a game whenever he's playing that sort of help extend drives and get a couple of third down conversions. So he's a pro's pro, but I think long term Marvin Hall gives him a lot more options. He's a lot more explosive. We saw some flashes of special teams ability during the preseason, so I think there's a lot more upside there. I think he has better hands. And the main difference is he can play both in the slot and outside, which is something that the Falcons haven't really used Nick Williams in that way. And it was interesting. We talked about this during the preseason, where when Julio Jones was out and Taylor Gabriel was out for those first few games in the preseason, it was actually Marvin Hall that got elevated to the starting lineup opposite Hanu and opposite Justin Hardy for those games. So it was very clear from the get-go that the Falcons had a lot of confidence in him. And, maybe he can be a little bit like the way Teron Ward was a couple of years ago when, they had a couple of injuries at the running back position, and all of a sudden this undrafted rookie sort of got thrust into the lineup and has been a fixture on the roster ever since. And you're right with Brian Hill. He hasn't quite gotten off to the start that I think a lot of people expected him to when we drafted him. I think one of the reasons why they decided to cut him just because he wasn't really contributing as a special teams player all that much. In the two games that Teron Ward was out, Hill barely saw reps on the special teams, and that was, we all know Keith Armstrong, and he's sort of a guy that sort of controls the back end of the roster. As for the other practice squad moves, Garrett Grayson, I remember watching him at Colorado State and thinking he wasn't much of a pro. And then when the Saints drafted him in the third round or whenever it was, I was just like, oh, that's a massive reach. That's not going to work out for them. He's a body at this point. I don't know much about the tackle they picked up, but obviously that's an area where they're sort of looking for depth. And if they can keep him around and see what he has potentially as a body there, then it helps out in the practices, but it's not a whole big deal. And the DN Woodard is another body on the D line where the depth right there is pretty rough. But yeah, no, overall solid moves. I think getting Hill back on the practice squad was a good move, and hopefully they'll be able to retain him for the rest of the season, and he'll be back in Atlanta ready to showcase his skills in 2018, and we'll see how much growth he shows, and hopefully he'll be a solid piece for the Falcons for the future. All right, let's talk Dolphins game, and not a very disappointing performance from the Falcons. They blew a 17-point lead. Of course, of all weeks to blow a big lead, they had to do it this past week. They struggled to stop the run. Jay Ajayi had a really strong first half. The Dolphins finished with 138 yards. The Dolphins dominated time of possession in the second half. They controlled the clock for 19 and a half minutes versus the 10 and a half minutes the Falcons had the ball. And with their offense sort of stagnating, a bunch of 3-and-outs, and a botched punt that led to really prime field goal position, the Dolphins were able to come back and sort of take the lead. And the Falcons had an opportunity going down the field at the end. Matt Ryan threw a pick off of a deflection, and they lost the game. And it was a bit of a surprise because we certainly talked about this game as one where we were pretty confident that the Falcons would take care of business. It looked like that was going to be the case if you watched the first two quarters. If you decided to, go out to someplace later on and skip the second half, then you probably were a little shocked to see that the Falcons lost the game. So, Scott, what were some of your takeaways from watching the game? A lot of talk has been occurring over the last day or so about what areas the team needs to work on to get better. Where do you land on that?
I think the biggest issue with the team is that first drive. If it's a defensive drive, fresh out of the half, they need to get off the field. I think if the defense can get off the field on that first drive, right out the half, they'll be okay. But the last few times they've been out there, they haven't been able to do it. And the offense, that first drive right out the half, needs to score a touchdown. I think that is outside of just the standard execution issues. And I think it's more execution than anything else. Like the four interception mistakes where it was bounced off the guy's hands. The guys aren't really fumbling the ball. Just those drop picks, as I like to call them. I mean, you can't have that, especially not in that spot. They do have to get the ball back, control the ball a lot more than just 10 minutes. I mean, honestly, I think it was just a bad matchup, too. As you've been saying, Falcons struggle with really good defensive fronts. And I think they had trouble against a really good defensive front. I don't think Green Bay has a good defensive front. I think Chicago does. I think Atlanta had a harder time with Chicago and Green Bay because of it. I think Detroit has a solid defensive front. For the most part, they're just okay. And Atlanta exposed them. And then when you get to Buffalo and Miami, those are two of the best defensive fronts in the NFL. Atlanta had issues. So I think this week, when you're talking about guys like Alan Branch and Malcolm Brown and Trey Flowers, Dietrich Wise, you're not talking about world beaters. You're talking about solid defensive players, but you're not talking about a crazy, ridiculously great defensive line. It's an average defensive line. And I think that's going to help out a lot. And I think on defense, the Falcons played a lot of really good pass blockers this week, and that's why they had issues creating any pressure. This coming week, Jack Mason doesn't match up well with Grady Jarrett. David Andrews and Joe Tooney are going to have hands full as well. Soldier's going to have a hard time handling the speed that comes from Zach. I mean, the only good offensive lineman on that entire offensive line right now is Marcus Cannon. So I think the Falcons are going to be a little bit better matched against the Patriots, both on offensive and defensive line. And that's what it comes down to. It comes down to the trenches. Atlanta couldn't win the trenches against the Bills. They couldn't win the trenches against the Dolphins, and they lost those games. They won the trenches against the Bears, even if it was only slightly. They won them against the Packers. They won them against the Lions. And they won those games. Win in the trenches, win the game. To the trenches, give up. You're not going to win a game. You can't win in the trenches.
Yeah, I mean, my main takeaway from the Dolphins game was the Falcons didn't finish the game, and that's really been a problem this season. They've got off to pretty good starts in most of the games this year, pretty much all their games, relatively speaking, but they've sort of struggled in the second halves of these games, and that was the case with Buffalo. That was the case with Miami. We even saw Green Bay, even though the Falcons were well in control of that game. The Green Bay did sort of, put up a lot of points in the second half, and even Detroit as well. And part of that was due to the turnovers. And so the Falcons need to figure out ways that, teams are learning how to beat them. And we saw this with Buffalo last week. We saw this with Miami as well, where teams are able to control the time of possession. The Falcons are dead last in the NFL in second half time of possession. And what ends up happening is the defense wears down. And, while they may give up a field goal here or there, because the offense isn't putting up the 34-ish points that they were putting up last year, a field goal here, a field goal there, a touchdown here, when you're only putting up 17 or 20 points in a game, those wind up because the offense isn't able to sort of extend their leads. It really sort of hurt them. And, that's something that the Falcons have to figure out a way. You're right. I think with the trench play, Miami, Buffalo, Chicago all have good fronts. They were all able to sort of slow down the Falcons offense, to a significant degree in those games because they only, scored 23, 17, and 17 points in those games. And, that's a problem. And that's something that the Falcons have to figure out ways to get better at. They have to find ways to be explosive. We see flashes of it, but we just don't see it consistently. It's like, they'll put together 2 or 3 really strong drives in a game, and then outside of that, they don't really do much offensively. And it's kind of the same thing with the defense. They'll start strong. They'll put together, look really solid in the first half of a game, but then for whatever reason, they run out of gas. Adjustments and the Falcons aren't making the proper adjustments or whatever it is, but it's basically been the same old song these last couple of weeks, and Chicago almost beat them that way, and Buffalo and Miami did manage to beat them in that way, and so the Falcons have to figure out how they how to finish games, and the last were due to that. So that's something that will certainly be on the front of their mind going into this week because of the last time they played the Patriots, and we'll see if they can get these issues fixed. Typically, when you're a Falcon fan, you have one issue, and then you fix that, and then another issue sort of springs up. But I think for the most part, the Falcons are in a good place. They just need to clean up some things, and they can play like they do in the first half for at least one quarter in the second half, they'd probably be 5-0 at this point. But it's not seems to be the case, and we'll see if they figure it out this week.
Agreed.
Okay. So we got some mailbag questions about the Dolphins game, but we'll get to those later. We do have a guest. We're here with us on the line is Brian Phillips, one of the co-hosts of Patriots Central Radio on the Pro Football Central Radio Network. You guys can check out that show every Wednesday at 9 o'clock, if I'm not mistaken. And probably one of us, either Scott or I, will be on that show on tomorrow's episode. So certainly stay tuned. We'll send out links for that. But Brian, I want to welcome you to the show, my friend. What's
happening, guys? I'm glad we got these technical difficulties worked out here, but how's everybody doing?
It's doing pretty good. We'd be doing better if the Falcons were coming off a win like your team.
Yeah, I think both fan bases are kind of in that mode right now where they don't expect week to week. being 4-2 heading into this weekend. But this has been the game that everyone's kind of had circled. Has the Patriots dropping, and I have them narrowly squeaking one out this weekend. But it's going to be tough. You guys present so many problems, and it's going to be a game that I think is going to be won in the trenches when there's going to be yards coming all over the place in the passing game. But I think ultimately it'll come down to the trenches, and I think it'll be whoever has the ball last. So we'll see, though. It'll be a fun one.
Brian, I'm curious. Talking about this game specifically, I know the Patriots are struggling on defense this year. I know they have a couple of injuries in the secondary with Stephon Gilmore and Eric Rowe dealing with some issues. Which of those injuries concern you the most? I know a lot of people talked about one of the big reasons they wound up acquiring Gilmore this offseason was basically to be a Julio Jones sort of matchup guy, the type of guy, that number one corner that they can sort of match up with a guy like Julio Jones. If Gilmore's absent, or I remember Rowe certainly spent a lot of time covering Julio in the Super Bowl. Which one of these injuries do you feel like is going to potentially affect the Patriots defense more this week?
Well, yeah, I think both of those guys were going to be key focal points as far as covering Julio. Like you referenced Eric Rowe covering him in a majority of the snaps during the Super Bowl. And yeah, Gilmore was brought in for guys. The Patriots have a slate of big receivers this year on their schedule. From Mike Thomas at New Orleans to Kelvin Benjamin, Julio Jones. Obviously, they go to Denver and get Demaryius Thomas, and Oakland with Mike Crabtree. Up and down the schedule. But obviously, in my opinion, there isn't any better when he's at full health. There's no one better in the game than Julio. And yeah, the surprise concussion popped up late on the injury report last week for Stephon Gilmore. I haven't heard anything yet this week as far as reports on how he's going to be looking as we get closer to game time. But obviously, it's still early. But I think it's going to be I think it's going to be probably on Malcolm Butler's shoulders if both of those guys can't go. Again, no report yet on Rowe either. Obviously, if either Rowe or Gilmore is in the game and active on Sunday, you'd expect a majority of the snaps, for them to have shading Julio with help over the top from McCourty. But it's going to be a team effort to cover Julio as it usually is.
Sounds about right. They're going to use a lot of over/under concepts, a lot of bracketing. You think?
You see a lot of it. It's funny, they were talking about their advanced scouting moving into the Super Bowl last year, talking about how they were dissecting his route running, Julio's route running, and as he was favoring the routes that had him kind of moving to his left, and so they were shading him to the outside, playing him to take away all those in-cutting routes. Obviously, I'm not up to date as far as his what is it, a hip injury or a back injury going on with him right now, Julio?
It's a hip, but
it's a hip.
He was 100% this last game. He looked perfectly fine.
He looked fine. It'll be Devin McCourty. Typically, it's Devin McCourty shading over that top receiver. You certainly see the Patriots missing Logan Ryan. Losing him to free agency was huge because they were able to put Logan Ryan out on number 2 receivers a lot of the time, or bring Logan Ryan in on bigger guys, play that press, and then have Devin McCourty as that security blanket over the top and everybody else do their thing. But and you might see a little Duron Harmon over there too. But it's going to come down to who's on that injury report come game time. If obviously, hopefully for Patriots fans, it's Stephon Gilmore, getting over this concussion. So
I'm curious talking about the defense, and the Patriots defense has been struggling this year. How much do you think is it because their offense is putting up so many points and maybe it's a little bit of garbage yards that are making them look so bad statistically, or is it legitimate issues on the defense? And I'm curious, what is the area that has been the most concerning to you this year?
Well, yeah, and you guys know how it is this early in the year with hyperbole. Everything is a little blown out of proportion. But And I'm always of the I'm always of the ilk of trying to maintain composure, my own personal composure when it comes to the Patriots and how many yards they always let up on a consistent basis. But this year, the real concern is it's been these big chunk plays, and we're really starting to see the product of not creating a pass rush and what it's doing to the guys in the secondary. I mean, quarterbacks have all day to throw, and even more so than typically, because typically New England is not a blitzing team. They typically play that, you hear it's so cliche, that bend don't break. They don't want to get make too many mistakes in the blitz. So they do a lot of 4 and 3 man rushes, but this year they're just not getting home, and they've let up, I think, 3 or 4 times the amount of 20-yard plays they let up the entire 2016 season combined. And it's a problem up front. They've got Dietrich Wise, the rookie who came in. He's starting to see a large increase in snaps. He's helping Trey Flowers, but outside of them, I mean, you're really not getting much push. Guys like Cassius Marsh and Kyle Van Noy, all these hybrid linebackers are doing what they can, but there's just not a lot of talent up there, and it's something that is definitely going to start really becoming a detriment. The further we get into the season, it's especially as it continues to happen and yards and big plays continue to mount. It's pretty frustrating.
So speaking of pass rush, the biggest question that I have for the Patriots is whether they're going to be able to stop speed rushes coming on the right side, or the defense's right side, so the Patriots' left side, and whether they're going to be able to handle the different stunt combinations that Atlanta can run. Because Atlanta did run a couple of them and did get sacks on them against the Patriots in the Super Bowl. How do you feel about your offensive line's growth this year versus last? And is Nate Solder kind of done? Because he looks way too slow to handle a guy like Tack.
Man, it's been a common theme. Me and Matt on Patriot Central have been talking about it the last few weeks. You'd expect a line with this young core like Tooney and Mason and Andrews inside to grow and get and show some improvement, especially with how many snaps and how many games they've logged together. But they have taken a huge step back this year, as far as an entire unit. But yeah, Nate Solder, nobody can really put a finger on it, what is going on with him, but he doesn't look right. There's something going on there, whether it's health or what. But he's been a real liability. Shaq Mason has really been. I heard you talk a little bit about the line earlier. Marcus Cannon's actually, last year he was second team All-Pro. He's taken, a step back, which you could expect from a guy who all of a sudden jumps up and is a second team All-Pro. He's kind of righted the ship a little bit. Shaq Mason's been the real star of the line this year. He's been really good. But Joe Tooney has just been getting worked, and David Andrews as well. So it's from left tackle all the way through to center. It's been a real issue. And, I can see Grady Jarrett and Tack McKinley having some fun. And it could be you guys have that front seven can really make it a long day for Tom. They've already let up, I believe it's 16 sacks this year. They let up, I believe, 16 or 13 all of last year. So it's been a problem.
I'm curious about the offense and sort of, the Patriots got off to a big explosive start for the first month of the season, but sort of have been slowed down a little bit the last 2 games. What would you attribute to some of that drop-off?
Well, I think they're really trying to establish the run. And it's something that when they do it effectively and they're able to dictate to the defense and they're able to really keep the offense on schedule, not only does it help the offensive line, which is struggling, but obviously it's going to burn a little more clock and take some of those big plays and those big numbers off the board. So you see a little bit of that. In Thursday, it's been 2 road games, one on Thursday night and then one against a Jets team that always plays them a little tough, especially in New York. It's 2 road wins, so they'll take it. But it's been a little bit of a struggle, like I said, with that offensive line. And then you look into the second half of games, they haven't been able to pull away. in the fourth quarter. It's been a little bit of sloppy play in Tampa Bay. It was penalties like crazy. They cleaned that up a little bit in New York last week, but it's just the team is still trying to find its identity. Gronk came back healthy last week, but he was out the week before. Brandon Cooks and Tom are still trying to get on the same page. They're still trying to really figure out how they want to use Brandon Cooks. I looked at it today, and it turns out he doesn't have a single red zone target this year, which I thought was interesting. You'd expect at least a few, even though Brandon Cooks obviously is not a big-bodied guy. The Patriots usually find ways to get their skilled playmakers the ball in the red zone. But it's been a little bit of a feeling out process. That being said, they're still the number 2, offense in DVOA, number 1 in yards per game in the league. And I think it won't be long until obviously you guys will be up there nipping at their heels too, especially with, what did I see? You guys rank 1 in the run game, or as far as DVOA. But that's the thing that worries me about you guys, that running game, man.
Yeah, because y'all have a hard time stopping the run.
Yeah, until last week. And obviously, Elijah McGuire doesn't strike as much fear in Patriots fans' eyes as Devontae Freeman and Tevin Coleman. We got a good dose of what those guys can do to the Patriots defense, obviously, in Super Bowl 51.
I mean, stopping Elijah McGuire, he probably should have been like a undrafted free agent, and he got drafted. Stopping Tevin Coleman and Devontae Freeman, which is arguably the best 1-2 running back combination in the league. That's going to be
so. I want to know who's arguing that, right? Like, I mean, this is the Falcons show. I want to do a little home cooking with you guys here. Who's arguing that this is not the best duo in the league? Like, I don't think it's close.
There's been some people that have been known to say otherwise. We got into a little bit of a tizzy this summer with somebody from the Dolphins that wanted to argue that Ajayi and Kenyon Drake were the...
Kenyon Drake?
Yeah.
Come on. I thought you were going to say Damian Williams.
The Titans would be the one team. I've spoken with Titans fans, and I'm like, I can at least see the argument. Because Henry and Murray are both awesome. I can at least get that.
But Murray, I mean, he's aging, and you're not getting... I mean, Kevin Coleman is... For me, he's my favorite passing back to watch because he's so smooth. I mean, what is he? He's got to be averaging 8 or 9 yards every time he touches the ball this year, right?
7.7.
It's up there.
Whew. I mean, yeah. And then Devontae's my guy. I love him, and I love him in tight space. But I mean, I don't know. Yeah, Derrick Henry's pretty nasty, but yeah, give me your guys' package all day long.
Appreciate that, Brian. We feel the same way.
Just not this weekend. Just dial it back a bit this weekend,
I think the only other team that would argue would be like the Panthers because they've got McCaffrey and Stewart once they finally figure out how to use McCaffrey, and the Titans.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. Run CMC. He's still got some work to do in my mind, but
yeah. Brian, I'm curious. What are your thoughts on the Patriots wearing all blue uniforms? That's got to be fun, right?
We got the color rush going again. Anything but those all whites from a couple weeks ago. Those things were brutal, man. You guys see those with the all whites, and they had the stripes going down the sides that didn't line up, and they had the silver helmets going on with them. Ugh, like I haven't been a big fan of the Patriots uniforms in general, like ever since they switched from Flying Elvis and whatever. I think our uniforms are pretty boring, but I mean, I'll go with the all blues, I guess. And hey, we're 1-0 in the all blues, so Jacoby Brissett last year against Houston with that 28-0 blowout. So yeah, we've yet to allow a point in the all blues.
There you go.
Small all right, size.
I'm very hopeful that streak will end on Sunday, but we'll see.
Yeah, it's looking that way.
Brock Osweiler, not Matt Ryan.
That's true. It's true.
Yeah.
But hey, we all see what Jacoby can do, man. This guy's balling out.
That he is.
Maybe they traded the wrong guy. Maybe they should have traded Garoppolo for Philip Dorsett.
You see, you're drinking some of that New England hot take Kool-Aid, though. That's what everybody's all about, the Jacoby Brissett now. But Jimmy's just hanging out back there. He's still gonna get his money. He's gonna be all right, and he'll be up there. He's patient.
Yeah. So Brian, I'm curious. You said that you were. It sounded like you were a little bit more optimistic about the Patriots' chances. Can we get a score prediction from you?
Well, what is the over/under? I always go with the over/under, and then I always take the over, and it always goes. Whatever I do, it's been a rough year for me. We'll put it that way.
All right, let me look it up real quick.
Let's just take a gander here.
Let's
I
see.
mean, obviously, you'd think right off the bat, you'd think it's got to be over 52 or 53, but
Basically, Patriots are favored by 3.
53.5.
53.5. Damn, I got to get a new site. I got 55.
Oh yeah, it's 55. You're right. I was looking at the opening line.
There we go. Yeah, 50. Man, that's a lot of points.
And it's still Patriots -3.
Man, I'm thinking, yeah, it's just a straight up home field line. I'm thinking 32-29. Got to, with time expiring. It's going to be. I think it's going to be whoever has the ball last, and I think both teams will kind of feel each other out in the beginning. You'll see the defenses and the secondaries kind of making plays, and then the offenses kind of get a little loose in the second half. But yeah, it's going to come down to it's just going to come down to who has the ball last, in my opinion. And obviously the old cliche, whoever wins the turnover battle. But in games like this with these kind of rosters, you need to win the turnover battle, or at least protect the football in general. Because the second you start coughing up the football, Matt Ryan will make you pay. Tom Brady will make you pay. So 32-29 Pats on a time expiring field goal.
Yeah. Where's Adam Vinatieri when you need him, right?
Hooking extra points in Tennessee.
Is he still playing in Indianapolis?
At the tender age of 98 years old.
Yeah, he's up there. Yeah.
It's okay. Our kicker's 43.
Hey.
I add a year every time we have the show. So, by the end of the season, they'll be 65.
Yeah.
Still getting the money. Adam Vinatieri's still rocking that Adams helmet, like the old school Adams helmet. He's like the only guy in the league wearing that thing anymore. I'm pretty sure it's illegal, but
I love that helmet, though.
Oh, it's awesome. It's no Morton Anderson with the chin bar, but
Oh man,
No,
we've had Morton on the show a couple of times. He's a funny guy.
Yeah,
that's great. Now that chin bar is in Canton right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So Brian, we will Scott and I will play rock paper scissors to see who's going to show up on Patriot Central Radio tomorrow night. Later on after this show. But before we let you go, is there any other thoughts you have on this game that you want to share with the listeners? And I'm sure we will talk quite a bit about it tomorrow. But any other thoughts before you bounce tonight?
Yeah, I know. In kind of just thinking about the game and how the game flow a little bit, how it's going to go. The things I'm interested to see are, I think you guys touched a little bit on it earlier, is the defensive tackles and the interior defensive lines in these squads and how they perform this weekend. I think will be huge. Specifically, how the Patriots defensive tackles Alan Branch, Malcolm Brown perform. We saw Devin Godchak and Jordan Phillips. Jordan Phillips, an underrated guy for Miami, got the job done. If Alan Branch can put up a performance like that, I think it's going to be something to keep an eye on. And then I'm excited to see Grady Jarrett.
You do realize Miami has Ndamukong Suh, right?
Yeah, but Ndamukong Suh is like that's a guy you just write off. He's going to do his thing anyway. We try to get to the uncovered narratives here, Scott.
Yeah, Suh is more of a problem than those two guys.
Dude, I'm telling you, Jordan Phillips, when he plays and he gets his motor up, is nasty. He's really nasty.
I'm a big Jordan Phillips guy. Yeah, I'm with you on that, Brian. Yeah, he's really good.
I liked Phillips in college. However, He's not Ndamukong Suh.
Well, no, of course not. He's not
Yeah.
making $26 million either. But, it's what you pay Sue for. It's nice when you can get a little Jordan Phillips on top of it. And this Godshaw kid looked pretty solid too. But hey, we have to deal with them twice.
In college for LSU last year, though. I'm shocked people are so surprised that he's doing well. Like, he was a top 100 player last year.
Yeah, I think it's more we're just surprised that Miami keeps churning out these nice draft picks because Tankersley's looking pretty solid on top of it too. So, it looks like the teams in our division are slightly trying to get things turned around with their draft picks with Trey White out there in Buffalo and these guys down in Miami. But we'll see. But no, I think those interior defensive tackle matchups with the interior O-lines are going to be huge on Sunday, and we'll probably get to it more tomorrow night on Patriot Central. But it's going to be fun, man.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Brian, go ahead and plug away. Let the people know where they can find Patriot Central and as you as well on Twitter and whatnot.
Yeah, at Patriot Central. You can find us on Twitter at Patriot Central, and we're every Wednesday night, 9 p.m., and with me and my co-host Matt LePan, the Panda. You can find me on Twitter at bphillips_pp. That's for patspulpit.com. SB Nation's where I write. I'll have a piece coming out this week on probably some New England Patriots personnel packages, whatnot. Been doing a study up on that. So, yeah, at bphillips_pp on Twitter.
All right, Brian. We appreciate you coming on and sharing your insights. We look forward to talking more with you on tomorrow night's Patriot Central Radio.
Cool. Thanks for having me, gentlemen.
All right, man. You have a good night.
See you.
All right, Scott, let's get back to the show. Before we go a little bit deeper into the Patriots game, let's go deeper into the Patriots game. Let's just do that now. Talking a little. What was that, Scott?
I said, all right.
All right, yeah. We'll circle back to those Dolphins mailbag questions at the end. Let's dive deeper into these matchups. We always talk about injuries a little bit. I think the big injury update that we're sort of waiting on this week is whether Mohamed Sanu is going to play this week. He's sort of on the bubble a little bit. They were saying 2 to 3 weeks. This is the second week, I think. So, we'll see if he plays, suits up. Hamstrings are tricky that way. But Vic Beasley came back early. But then again, Vic Beasley didn't do a whole lot in that Dolphin game. So maybe they'll sit him. I don't know. And we're also waiting to see what the update on Courtney Upshaw is. That ankle injury has lingered now for, a month? And
Yep.
So we'll see if it keeps lingering. And it's important because the Falcons do need to sort of beef up their D-line rotation, and losing Upshaw for another week certainly could create some problems for at least when the Falcons are trying to create some pressure on Tom Brady, if they're forced to play their D tackles a little bit too long, and maybe that's contributing to some of the issues in the second half, that maybe the D-line is running out of gas a little bit, and having an extra body there like Upshaw certainly would make a lot of sense. The one interesting matchup to me in this game is going to be Rob Gronkowski, who did not play in the Super Bowl. I'll be honest with you, and I probably said this at the time, like, if Gronk had played in that game, I would have not been very confident that the Falcons would have won that game. And so, him not being there, obviously we all know what happened. But it'll be interesting to see how the Falcons handle that matchup. I'm curious, Scott, do you feel like either Keanu Neal or Devondre Campbell, would you rather see one of those guys often matched up with Gronk, or do you feel like the team should just try to rotate both of those guys over there and do their best to sort of double team Gronk a little bit?
I think the only guy that can really handle Gronk is Devondre Campbell. He's got the length, he's got the size, he's got the strength, and Gronk is pretty much uncoverable as it is. But if you've got a guy like Devondre Campbell, you stand a better chance. I think on top of that, you need to have a guy behind him. So maybe even a Brian Poole helping out in coverage, or, even DeMonte Casey. Gronk makes that offense really tough to defend, especially when you factor in Brandon Cooks. The only guy I'm not really worried about on their offense is Chris Hogan. because even their running backs are going to run out the backfield and go crazy on Atlanta. So basically, the best way to stop this offense is to hit Brady early, often, and pretty much almost take him out the game, hit him so much. Now, I'm not wishing for an injury. I'm just saying I want to see Brady sack 10 times. That's
I think most people would agree with you on that one, Scott.
I think we all want to see Brady take that shot that Aaron Rodgers took from Big Beast.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting because we saw Grady Jarrett and Dwight Freeney were the two most effective pass rushers in the Super Bowl. Freeney was going up against Solder, and Jarrett was he was beating everybody, but it seemed like Shaq Mason was the guy he was going after. He was beating the majority of the time. So it'll be interesting to see if Jarrett can sort of repeat that success. It'll be interesting to see if either Claiborne or Tack can sort of repeat Freeney's success on that other side. It'll be interesting to see what Poe can do. It'll be interesting, Beasley was basically blanked by Marcus Cannon in that Super Bowl. And, coming off the hamstring injury, the Falcons are going to need him to definitely step up as well with the pass rush and provide that heat because, when you look at the Patriots offense and you look like the targets, it's like an even distribution between Cooks, Gronk, Hogan, and James White. And so, James White really gave the Falcons fits in that Super Bowl. He had 14 catches for 110 yards. And receiving running backs have been a little bit problematic for the Falcons this year. Wasn't a big deal against Miami because they don't really have great receiving running backs other than Damian Williams. But, we've seen other guys have some success against them. And when the Falcons play their sort of man coverage, they can be good at it, but they can also give up some plays from time to time, particularly with those running backs underneath. So that'll be an interesting test. You talked about Brandon Cooks. We've seen Desmond Trufant in past performances against the Saints shadow Cooks and basically shut him down. I'm curious, because of that past performance, would you like to see Trufant shadow him, or receivers, would you just basically have Trufant park on the left side of the field and do his normal thing?
Oh, no, you definitely have to have Trufant shadow Cooks. So basically, if I'm defending the New England Patriots, I have Trufant shadow Cooks. I put Alford directly against Hogan because I don't think Hogan can handle Alford. I think he handled Collins because Collins just isn't physical. But Alford would destroy Hogan. And I think Brian Poole is just a better football player for that slot role this year than he was last. And I think he can handle Danny Amendola. The question comes in when they have Philip Dorsett out there. If Dorsett really has that chemistry, what goes on? Because I don't know. I just think it's the best. I think it's the best possible way for the Falcons to match up. You need that physical guy against Hogan. You need that speed guy against Cooks. You need basically your interior 3 or 4 guys to attack Kowski in different coverage styles. I'd even be open to like Robber style, cover 1 all day, where you're having Campbell man up on Gronk and then just have the other 2 guys, whether it's Neal or whether it's Allen. Whatever side Gronk's on, that guy is bracketing him. The other guy's playing deep. To me, that's what you got. And I think that's the best way to defend. And press all day. Throw off the timing. Get guys time to pass rush. And I think you could have a lot of pass rush.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this matchup goes because the Patriots' sort of strength of their offense and at least their passing game, I think, is attacking the middle of the field with guys like Gronk and White and when Edelman was healthy, certainly him running those crossing routes over the middle in those pick plays and whatnot. So I think they will find ways to basically make plays against this Falcons defense given enough time. And so I do think it's going to be really important for the pass rush to do a really good job in this game and really get after Brady to sort of help out the guys on the back end because even though I think the Falcons do have the guys that can match up in this game, obviously if you give Brady enough time, he's just going to pick apart your defense. So they really need to sort of be aggressive and really fire up the pressure, maybe throw in some blitzes here and there, try to catch him off guard. And if they can do that, I think they'll be in pretty good shape. But they're going to need help from the offense. And this is one of those games where it's like the offense has been in a little bit of a funk these last couple of games. They're playing probably, statistically the worst defense in the league. Brian mentioned it. The big issue with the Patriots is giving up chunk plays. That's the recipe for success for the Falcons. So basically, if they can't come away from this game looking explosive against this Patriots defense, as you said, Scott, the Patriots front isn't great. We didn't think they were great last year in that Super Bowl, and they were pretty effective in that game. But partially that's owed to sort of guys being a little bit beat up in that game on the Falcons' offensive line. But it is one of those things where Matt Ryan should have time to find his receivers. The Falcons should be able to take some shot plays in this game, particularly if Gilmore and Rowe are out. Even if only one of those guys is out, that's a big loss to the Patriots secondary because both of those guys would probably be asked to sort of help out with Julio quite a bit. And, Malcolm Butler is just not, I think Malcolm Butler is a really good corner, but that's not really his sort of matchup. He's more of a speed guy than a size guy. And, Johnson Batamosi, he's a guy that they sort of picked up in training camp and, may be playing well, but I don't necessarily feel like that's.
Batamosi blows, man.
Yeah,
he's bad.
I don't feel like he's a matchup. He's a guy that's going to be able to match up particularly well. So this is really an opportunity for this Falcons offense to get out of their funk. We know the running backs can make plays both on the ground and in the passing game. The Patriots have slow linebackers. They like to play a lot of zone, so there should be opportunities. It really is like a grab bag for the Falcons offense, and so they need to do their best to sort of take pressure off the defense because we know this Patriots offense can score and they will score points against this Falcons defense. And so the offense really needs to sort of, dictate this game and really, put the pressure on the Patriots to have to play our style of football as opposed to us trying to play their style of football. So, big week for the offense, big week for Sark, big week for the weapons, and we'll see how they do. I'm somewhat optimistic, but, I've been somewhat optimistic the last 2 weeks, and it hasn't really come to fruition. So hopefully they'll get their act together this week.
I hope they do, because I think this is the week to do it. They've got too many guys, too many talented guys that can win individual matchups all over this team that just aren't doing it. And there's no reason for this team to be as bad as it's looked the past few weeks. Like, it hasn't looked like the Falcons of last year. It's just looked like a bad team. And I don't like that. And I don't think any Falcons fan likes that. So we just need them to look like the team that they've got the potential to be. We need Sarkisian to kind of get his head out of his ass and start running some more play action plays and being a little bit more aggressive just in general. He's playing scared, basically. He's calling scared football, and scared football doesn't win games. And he needs to realize that and start calling better games. Now, I'm not going to come out here and be like, oh my God, Atlanta needs to fire Sarkisian. Sarkisian sucks. I'm not that guy because I like Sarkisian. I think he's a good coach. I think he needs to get his head out of his ass, though. And he needs to get it together, and he needs to make the Falcons' offense look like the Falcons' offense of last year, not the Falcons' offense of this year.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that, Scott. Like, I haven't been a huge fan of what the play calling game plans have been so far this year. We saw, high quality stuff against the Packers. We saw some good stuff against the Lions, but really haven't seen a whole lot other than those two games. And we've been down this road before. Like, we were down this road in 2015 with Kyle Shanahan. We were down this road in 2013, or really the entire Cutter era. We were down this road with the Malarkey era. That's towards the end of it. It's about being explosive. The Falcons have to get chunk yardage plays. They have to be able to when they want to go for a shot play, they need to hit it. It's not just the play calling, but it's everybody on the team that needs to step up. And it's guys got to get open. Matt Ryan needs to start hitting these throws instead of overthrowing receivers and throwing passes out of bounds. The offensive line needs to hold up better. There was a play in the second half of the Dolphins game where the Falcons dialed up a shot play, I think in the third quarter. I think it was the first play they had in the third quarter. They went to an 8-man protection and they gave up a sack. Like, you can't give up a sack on an 8-man protection when the Dolphins are only rushing 5 guys.
The Dolphins were only rushing 3. That's what's even more embarrassing about it. They were only rushing 3.
So it is one of those things where it's like, yes, Sark certainly deserves to be in the crosshairs somewhat, but it's not just simply, the Falcons are playing well and Sark is holding them back. They need all guys to step up. They need to come together in brotherhood maybe, and figure this thing out. And this is the perfect week. They have a team that's not been playing well, particularly offensively. And if they need a spark, they're not going to find a better opportunity in pretty much the rest of the season than playing this Patriots defense. So if they can't figure it out this week, then there's not a whole lot of reason to be overly optimistic for the rest of the season. But we'll see how it goes. Let's circle back and answer some of these mailbag questions about the Dolphins game. Of course, as always, they always seem to come from our good friend Evan Birchfield. His first question is, Freeman only getting 2 carries in the second half.
Devontae Freeman should have had 10 carries in the second half. The fact that he only had 2 is a big reason why the offense didn't succeed.
I take a little bit of a different stand. I don't think this is, I understand people's being like, Devontae needs the ball more, but at the same time, I'm not going to get mad at Sark for giving the ball to Tevin Coleman because Tevin Coleman makes plays. Like, I'm not going to be the guy that's going to be like, oh no, Sark is doing a bad job because he's giving the ball to Tevin Coleman. Like, that's not an issue to me. The Falcons struggled in the second half for a variety of reasons. Freeman not getting touches is, I think, more a flow of the game than a design thing. So that to me is not a big deal. I think that's more sort of like hindsight, people's being like, oh, they need to feed Devontae. And it's like, yeah, they do need to feed Devontae, but they also need to feed everybody. So, not everybody can eat. And, if it just boils down to let's just feed Devontae at the expense of getting our other players involved, our wealth of weapons, sometimes some people are going to have to go hungry for a series or two as we try to distribute the ball to a wealth of weapons. So I'm not too upset about that specifically. I'm more upset with the overall offensive performance, not specifically Devontae didn't get enough touches.
I think the issue isn't just Devontae didn't get enough touches. I think the issue is more, why didn't they run the ball more? I think that's the real question.
Well, part of that is they weren't doing a good job running the football. They had a couple
actually call more than 4 runs.
But if you only have 8 plays, how many more runs do you expect them to call in that situation?
They called twice as many passes as runs the second half.
But, part of that, you got to discount the last drive. Of course, they're throwing the ball in 2-minute offense every single snap. You're not running the football when you're down 20-17 with 2 minutes left in the game. So discount all those passes. Outside of that, it's pretty much a balanced offense. And the problem is they're not able to sustain their offense as opposed to, just because they didn't run the ball. So again, I think it's blaming the lack of running is more of a flow of the game thing than necessarily a bad design thing. I just think that's, I don't know. I don't get that criticism. I think is the weakest criticism you can have for Sark's game plan.
Another part of the real issue is the function of the runs, the way that they were running the ball, those weird tosses as opposed to an actual, legitimate handoff is partially what was hurting it too. Because the timing was off on those tosses. There was a toss that they threw. He tossed it back to Coleman. Coleman got hit right after. But the timing on it was too slow developing for a run against the side that Ndamukong Suh was on.
Well, I mean, look, I can't get mad. Again, this to me is more just like nitpicking, in my opinion, because Like they ran a toss to Coleman, he got 20 yards on it. It was one of the few successful runs they had all game. They ran a toss to Coleman last week against Buffalo, he got 30 yards on it. So it's not as if like toss plays are bad, equal bad. And on that specific one at the end, that was basically just Julio missing a block. Like that's like it's not the play call wasn't bad. It was just they didn't execute the play. Julio's got a block. I think it was William Hayes, and he was supposed to down block him, and he didn't, and it blew up the play. And so, that's not a play call issue. That's an execution issue. So again, to me, I think the criticisms of Sark I think are valid for the most part, but like these ones I think are just people just reaching for stuff. Like if you're going to criticize Sark, you're going to criticize him for the lack of shot plays, the lack of the poor route combinations, those sorts of things. I think the dink and dunk stuff, I think a lot of that was having to do with the knowing that they weren't effective running the ball. And so oftentimes they called dink and dunk passes on second down, getting us 6 yards here, getting 7 yards here. And that was to supplement the running game to basically function as runs. So again, that's not an issue to me if people are like, oh, he didn't, can't throw it deep every single time. And then a couple of times they did dial up some shot plays in the second half. But the offensive line broke down. They got behind schedule, and then the offense sort of fell apart. And like that happens. But, again, I think there's a lot of valid criticism of Sark, but I think a lot of people are just sort of reaching and just saying stuff that isn't really a fair criticism, in my opinion. Evan's next question is, even in a loss, who was the brother of the week, did the most for the team, but made no headlines?
Wes Schweitzer. Despite Ndamukong Suh having a sack, I do think that that's more on the overall play design. There's nobody open. Ryan had to sit there and hold it for 4 or 5 seconds than it was on Schweitzer himself. Outside of that, like, the Falcons did really well holding up against Suh. Yes, Suh made a couple of plays, but for the most part, Suh was quiet. I think there were like maybe 3 different plays that I can think of that Suh made, and then outside of that, there were 65 snaps that he didn't do anything on. So,
good choice.
For me, it's Schweitzer.
This is tough. I'll go with Derek Shelby. I think Derek Shelby, among the defensive linemen, had a pretty solid game. The Falcons were struggling against the run, but I don't think it was because Derek Shelby was struggling. So I thought he did some really good stuff, started playing stronger in the second half. I think he was a big reason. His being, getting leverage and his doing a good job with his run fits were a big reason why the Falcons' second half run defense was a much better than their first half defense. So I'll throw out Derek Shelby there. Evan's next question is, did no Sanu have an impact on the passing game against Miami?
I mean, I would say it did. Sanu's one of those guys that you don't really expect to have this kind of impact outside of his third down plays. And Atlanta was probably the worst they've been all year on third down. They still were 6 for 11, but whenever they got behind the chains on third downs, behind schedule on third down, they were unable to do it. And it's one of those areas where Sanu, when he comes in, he's able to get that on third 12. He's going to go 13 yards down the field, and he's going to stand there and just wait for the ball.
Yeah. I'll surprise some people, and I'll say, yeah, I think it had an impact on the game. I don't think it had a huge impact on the game, but I certainly think having a player like Sanu out there to help move the chains, as you say, Scott, to sort of catch some of those underneath stuff probably would have helped. I don't see how it could have hurt, but yeah, I wouldn't necessarily go as far as people saying the reason why the Falcons offense, has struggled is because Sanu hasn't been in the game. I wouldn't go that far, but I do think not having him, obviously having him is better than not having him. So I certainly think it had some impact on the game. Scott, do you have any call-outs this week before we get to the rest of the mailbag questions?
Just all the Chicken Little fans that are sitting here all angry about Sarkisian. Yeah, I mean, I'm not exactly the happiest with him right now, but I do think that he is a good coordinator who made a couple of bad calls, as opposed to a guy who's a bad coordinator who just sucks the way that, I don't know, Mike Mularkey was here. Like, Mularkey, I don't think was a great coordinator. I think the team did a lot of things in spite of him, especially 2011 season. So do I just quit acting like the world is falling because of the one game or the 2 games or the 3 games? It's an adjustment period every time you move to a new coordinator. Sometimes Ryan has a great start with the coordinator, like he did with Cutter. Sometimes Ryan has some issues, like he did with Shanahan. And even Shanahan, he had a good start, and then he tapered off. I'd rather have the issues now, and then, I don't know, score 40 points a game the rest of the season. I mean, if the Falcons score 40 points a game the rest of the season, we're not going to hear a word of it. Oh, no, why can't we have Shanahan?
Yeah, I'm trying to sit here and think of someone or something I want to call out. I could think of a couple of players, but I'm not going to call out players because I just think that's goofy. Just guys that I want to play better. But, I guess I'll just, I'll call out the Falcons team. I think maybe some of their issues are a little bit of complacency. I think some of the second half struggles, they seem to get up and they just like coast a little bit. And I don't think they're really finishing games to the degree that they need to. I think maybe they feel a little bit entitled. And that was, something that we talked about this summer going into this season, whether they would be a little bit complacent about their success from last year and not be willing to do some of the little things. And at least the last 2 weeks, it looks like that's been the case. So I think guys, they need to, I think certainly this week, there certainly will be no excuse for them not to be fired up going into this game. But I do feel like this is a game where, win or lose, there's still a long season to go. There's still a lot of things that they got to get worked out. And so, they can't necessarily blow their load this Sunday and then be gassed playing a beatable Jets team on the road and whatnot. So, they need to treat this as like any other game, win the game, obviously, maybe be a little bit extra inspired to win it. But, you're not going to win any Lombardi trophies this week. That's still many, many weeks off, 4 months away. So they just got to work at it. And I guess that'll be my call out this week, I guess. All right, let's get to the rest of the mailbag. All right, from Gene Kevin Hong. He asks, it's pretty evident that our run D has been struggling with Crawford out and our defensive players being smaller and faster type players. How can we improve our run defense?
Play the damn gaps. This is a one-gap defense. Atlanta needs to just use their gap discipline. That's been the biggest issue, more than anything else, is gap discipline. If they play their gaps, if they play their run fits, there's not going to be all these massive runs. You're not going to have a guy coming in, running up against the fullback and opening up a huge hole. Play your run fits. That's simple.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I don't think there's I don't expect there's anything that we can do from a personnel standpoint that's going to change anything. I think guys have to be better. Particularly, I blame a lot of the issues with the run defense on the linebacker play. I think a couple of guys are freelancing a little bit too much. I think a couple of guys are playing to filling those run fits. I think those guys need to step up quite a bit. Right now, as far as I'm concerned, when I look at this Falcons defense, I like the secondary. I think the defensive line certainly could be played better, but I don't really have a major issue with them. I think they're coming along, and I think as Beasley works back to health, as Tack continues to develop, and as we figure out what our depth situation at the D tackle position, I feel like the arrow is pointing up with the defensive line play as the season wears on. The linebacker group, though, I have not been very impressed with them this year, and I do think a lot of the issues that we have against the run, because of our focus on speed and playing fast and all that sort of stuff, gets problematic when we have to play the run, because I think some of our guys don't really enjoy mixing it up, and I think teams that are willing to and wanting to punch the Falcons in the mouth, I think the linebackers sort of expose the chin a little bit of the Falcons defense a little bit, and it gets exposed a little bit. So I think Jeff Ulbrich or whomever has to challenge these guys. They need to. I don't want to use the S word and call them soft, but to play less soft. That's what I would say.
I have to agree that the run fit is an issue on Duke Riley's side more often than not, too, because he's having an issue getting lined up. So that goes in with your linebackers. They're not getting aligned in the proper holes the way that they need to be.
I personally think Deion Jones has been a lot more problematic there, but I know I have a minority opinion on that, so I'll let that slide. Gene Kevin's next question is, I generally agree with your overall assessment, he's referring to me, of Sark being a C-plus coach so far this season. Do you think he has room to improve? And if he doesn't, how do you think the Falcons should compete for another Super Bowl appearance without an elite defensive unit?
It would not be shocking to see the Falcons go either way on offense. I think that the room to improve is there because the talent's there. I also think this is probably the worst case scenario for the offense the first 5 games. So there is the ability to get there. The overall worst case scenario is this offense is what it is. They're scoring 24 points a game. I mean, that's where it's at. Now, can the Falcons win a Super Bowl with an offense like this that gets hot in the playoffs? Yes, very easily. Especially if, the last few games they're going 35, 35, and in the playoffs 40, 40, 40. Boom, there's your elite offensive unit for the playoffs. Kind of like what happened with the Ravens when they won with Joe Flacco. They had a deep defense, or they had an elite defense, but Flacco went unconscious in the playoffs and magically became a great player. 4 games.
Yeah. I mean, I look at it like this. I think as Scott said, I think Scott nailed it with there is room for improvement just because the talent is there for them to play better. If we're talking about competing for a Super Bowl this year, if they continue to only be able to put together 2 good quarters of offensive play, that's going to be a problem. That's not going to win you many playoff games unless the defense does become that elite defensive unit. And if they can't stop the run, they're not going to become an elite defensive unit. It's just simple as that. And if the pass rush doesn't improve, then that's going to the Super Bowl is not really a conversation at this point until they start getting some of these issues resolved. You can make the case that playoffs, aren't really isn't necessarily an issue until they get some of these issues resolved. So I think there is room for improvement. I think if and when the Falcons start hitting those big plays, once they start getting more explosive, I think they'll everything will start clicking into place and things will get back to where I think a lot of people want them to be. And again, as I said earlier, that's from Sark's play calling. I do think, as Scott said, more play action. I think sort of centering the offense around the running game, I think makes a lot of sense there. So in that regard, I understand where people are coming from when they criticize the lack of running in the second half, but I think specifically it doesn't necessarily apply in that instance. But I think, more running the ball, more play action, more design shot plays, more vertical route combinations that are more like what we saw last year instead of some of these man beater concepts that I think they're utilizing in the same way that they sort of utilized that with Cutter and Malarkey, and I think that sort of held back the explosiveness of the offense. And not to sound like I'm throwing too much shade at Matt Ryan, but he's just got to start hitting these throws. Like you can't be throwing deep passes to Taylor Gabriel and throwing them 18 yards out of bounds. Like you just can't. That's not going to be a catchable pass. And if he's afraid of turning the ball over, I understand that because that's been an issue this season. But it's got to get fixed. So we'll see how it goes. I think there's room for improvement. I don't expect it to sort of flip on automatically, and I think it's going to be something that they're going to have to work at for the rest of the season. So I do think we're going to still have some ups and downs and whatnot as the season progresses. But hopefully, they'll get it solved by the time we get down the stretch, and when we'll need it, when we play a much tougher schedule, I think, in terms of teams that are better than some of the teams we've faced so far this season. But we'll see how it goes. Linus Van Pelt, I am smart on Twitter, asks, why isn't Tack getting more third down snaps?
I could not tell you because that would be the primary spot that I'd use him. I would use him pretty much third down and only third down for a good minute. They like the way he plays run defense, and I can't blame him for that, but at the same point, you need that guy on third down to rush the passer. Like that's what he does best. He's a Tasmanian devil when you throw him out there. Use him.
Yeah. I don't think this was a major issue against Miami. Like I think if I saw the numbers correct, Tack had 17 pass rush snaps. Beasley had 20. I think Claiborne had 22. So, he was right there with those two guys. I mean, maybe if you want to see him get more work than those two, I get that. But, Beasley and Claiborne are the guys. So I think if you I understand why the coaching staff probably preferred to play those guys a little bit more this week. We'll see what happens with Tack going forward, especially with Beasley coming off of a pretty lackluster performance and maybe the team being wondering if he's fully recovered. So maybe we'll see a little bit more of Tack this upcoming week than, dialing back a little bit with Beasley and sort of picking and choosing his spots as opposed to just throwing him out there for the majority of those nickel snaps. So, yeah, I don't think this was a major issue. I think if Linus, if you didn't think Tack was getting a lot of snaps, I think it was just because he wasn't doing much with the snaps he was playing. So, yeah. Scott Ramsey at X Never Broken X, will you please give a detailed breakdown of the Coleman pitch play near the end of the game that resulted in an 8 or so yard tackle for loss? Who missed what assignment to blow that play out of the water?
I'm gonna let you take this one over because I didn't analyze the plays just yet as far as like who blew what block. I just know the function of the play.
The Falcons went to a oh wow, why did I just blank on the word? They moved Jake Matthews to the right side. Offset, right? Yeah, whatever. We'll go with that. Offensive line. So they had Matthews lining up at the right tackle beside Ryan Schrader. And they ran the pitch to the right. Julio was supposed to down block on the DN, which I think was William Hayes, while Matthews pulled to the outside, and I think maybe Coleman too. And because Julio missed his block, Hayes came right through and broke up the play, and that's why. So it was Julio who missed his assignment.
Which kind of sucks because Julio is the best player that's on the Falcons, and when he misses his assignment, you're not expecting it to happen. But
yeah, well, I mean, Julio was an amazing blocker at Alabama, but in the NFL, he hasn't really been that good of a blocker, and it's a minor nitpick because he does so many other amazing things, but he's just kind of an okay blocker. He'll do his job for the most part, but he's probably the fourth best blocker on the team at wide receiver. So
unless he's going against like a corner or a safety, I think when he goes against those positions, he's dominant. But anywhere else, I agree with you.
yeah, I mean, it's sort of he picks and chooses a spot. Like he'll blow because he has a strong rivalry with Patrick Peterson, but like most other, like if he doesn't, if you're beneath him, he's just like whatever. You're just a gnat to me. I'm not going to worry about you. Yeah. D-Rock the Party asks, according to Warren Sharp, Atlanta played the hardest strength of schedule of defense so far, but has the third easiest the rest of the year. Any more optimistic? I looked this up, and he's referring to the defenses the Falcons have played so far, according to Sharp Football on Twitter. It's been the toughest schedule, and so they have pretty easy schedule in terms of the defenses that they're going to face the rest of the year. So, any thoughts on that, Scott?
I think that's good news for the Falcons. They played the third hardest schedule of defenses so far. Yet, for whatever reason, their offense looks like it's regressed. Maybe it's just the teams they played. Maybe it's just bad matchups early. Maybe that's why the team doesn't look great, is because the matchups haven't been conducive for them to look great.
Yeah, well, I mean, they got a real easy game this week from a defensive matchup. So if they can't get it together this week, then, I don't know what else to say. I think, the rest of the schedule, I think, there is some validity to this sort of measurement. Obviously, they're not using, the most, I don't know what the exact metrics that Warren Sharp is using. He's got his own sort of metrics for that. But, you look at the rest of the schedule, and as Scott said at the top, you look at the teams that have given the Falcons the most trouble. It's been teams with good fronts. You look at Minnesota, you look at Carolina, you look at Seattle, and outside of those three teams in those four games, you don't necessarily look at a bunch of teams that have really imposing fronts. The Jets have a good D-line, but they haven't been playing great this year. The Saints D-line has played much better this year, at least from a statistical standpoint. We'll see whether that sort of falls back to earth as the rest of the year wears on. And we know Tampa Bay, Gerald McCoy, and when they're healthy, they got some pieces. So, we'll see if this metric holds up as the season wears on. But it certainly means, as far as Buffalo goes, as far as Miami goes, it's certainly believable that other than a couple of those teams I mentioned earlier, for the most part, they have some favorable matchups, going up against Dallas, New England. Again, the Saints are playing better defense, but, how long is that going to last? So, they'll have some opportunities to make hay. D-Rock's next question is, Atlanta's defense has been 32nd in forcing turnovers for a few weeks now. Why are they struggling to, and how can it be fixed?
They got to jump routes. They got to knock the ball out. I mean, they just got to play Falcon-style defense. That's the only way to go about it. I mean, there's not any one thing they can do. It's a group of things that they have to do all at once.
Yeah, it's hard to force turnovers when you're giving up 18-yard runs to Jay and Johnny. So, yeah, they just got to play more disciplined football. If they can, once they start stopping the run, once they start, playing more disciplined, rallying to the ball, all those sorts of things, they can get more turnovers. With more, if the pass rush can start affecting the quarterback, you can get some, quarterbacks moving off their spot, throwing some off-platform throws, which lead to some mistakes and forcing the ball, and that gives DBs an opportunity to make some plays on the ball and whatnot. So it's all around thing. They just got to start playing better defense. Bottom line.
Yeah, basically.
Evan Birchfield, thoughts on the NFC South currently compared to your prior to Week 1 predictions?
It's a lot better. Like, a lot better than it was. I wasn't expecting it to be anywhere close to this good. Especially not the Saints. But I almost wonder if the Saints are a flash in the pan. Smoke and mirrors kind of thing.
Yeah. I thought Carolina would get off to a slower start this year, just because of the issues with Cam Newton and his shoulder, and it did seem that way for the first week or two. but they've started to get things rolling. The Saints are playing better than I expect. The Bucs are a little down, but that could be a little bit as expected. They tend to be a little bit up and down. So I think the division has been stronger earlier in the season than I expected it to be. We'll see if that sort of, if I predicted them to finish stronger and make, I figured the Falcons would get off to a fast start, like 5-0 at this point, and everybody would be celebrating, oh, we're the best, and no one's going to catch us in the NFC South. And as we get into the NFC South games, they might drop a game here or there, and things might get a little bit hairy for those, week 15 through week 17, and maybe a game or two, things be a little bit tighter. So maybe that'll flip flop, and maybe it's a tight race early in the season, and then somebody's going to start breaking things out. Hopefully, it's the Falcons as we get into the rest of the schedule. So we'll see what happens.
I really do hope that it's the Falcons.
Yep, you and everybody watching and listening to us right now, except for that one guy who's from the Saints fan that's listening to us and hate listening to us. But anyway. Next question comes from Jalen Muhammad. He asks, what's the number one reason the Falcons haven't been playing well?
Execution. Honestly. I think it's more the fact that they're just screwing up. Like, they're shooting themselves in the foot more than anything any other team has been doing to them. They're making bad plays on the ball. They're making, they're giving up stupid interceptions at bad spots because the receivers just aren't hauling the ball in when they've got it in their hands. I mean, little things. And it's always going to be little things, but that's what's causing it. Just execution. You fix the execution, you fix the team.
Yeah. I think it's, if I'm blaming one thing, and me, it's hard for me to blame just one thing. But I think not being able to finish games. Like, if they play the way that they play in the first half of these games into the second half, they'd be 5-0. We'd be talking about the Falcons being, if not the best, one of the best teams in the NFL. And people would be talking, running the table and all that sort of thing. So I think they just got to figure out what's going on at halftime, whether it's the other team making adjustments, whether they're not making the right adjustments, energy, effort, whatever the case may be. But guys, they just need to start playing better in the second half. And if they can, again, if they can basically do what they do in the first half of games, in the second half of the games, they wouldn't be having these issues. We wouldn't be talking about any of this stuff.
Exactly.
Jalen's next question is, when is the next time we can feel good about this godforsaken team?
Never. You chose to be a Falcons fan.
Yeah,
Whenever they win their first Super Bowl, that's when we can feel good. Okay? Until then, just deal with being a Falcons fan. All right? We chose this life.
Yeah.
We chose this horrible existence. Deal with it.
Pretty much, yeah. You're starting to regret the decisions you made when you were, 6 and 7 and 8 years old. Those tend to catch up with you now as a Falcon fan. Hopefully they make us feel.
Vic and Jamal Anderson. I'm going to be a Falcons fan.
Yeah. I hope they make us feel good about this team on Sunday night. I know a lot of people, have been looking forward to this game. I know a lot of fans have been looking forward to this game for 8 months now. So I hope again, they're not going to win any Lombardi trophies this week, but if they can get fans back on board with a win on Sunday night, then yeah, I think that'll at least give us a week of feeling good about this team. So I think people will like that. Appreciate that.
I think they will too.
Jalen's next question: long term, who do you think replaced?
Who do I think is getting replaced? As far as what?
Who do you think, if you're looking at this D-line, who do you think they should try to upgrade maybe this offseason or something? Or maybe in season, I don't know. Maybe you feel like it's that big a deal.
I mean, in season, they need to upgrade the depth. The issue isn't Poe. It's not Jared. It's not Beasley. It's not Pack. It's not, Brooks Reed or even Shelby. Or even Claiborne. The issue is the guys behind Poe and Jared. Tani Tupuo, Joe Villano, they're not the same kind of guys that you need when you have like Dantari Poe and Grady Jarrett are up here. Those guys are down here. You need a couple guys that are like right here. So you need Upshaw back. And then I know I'm going to get some hate mail for this, but I think they should cut either Topu or Villano and bring back Rashid Hagan. I know I'm not going to get love from a lot of people for saying that, but if he shows that he is truly remorseful and he takes the punishment like a man and then tries to be better, I'm all for giving him a second chance, but with a short leash.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to be a popular take. I understand. I don't quite agree with it, but I'm not going to sit here and hate on that take. Scott, that's your choice. Now looking at this question, he says long term. So I'm thinking long term, who should the team replace? I mean, obviously, Poe's going to be a free agent. Claiborne's going to be a free agent. Brooks Reed is going to be potential cut. They can cut Jack Crawford or Derek Shelby this offseason. So, I mean, any one of those guys could be somebody you could replace. I don't know. I'll say something that might sound like a little bit of a hot take, but I kind of think they need to replace Vic Beasley, and not in this way that you probably initially took that. I think Vic Beasley needs to play a little bit more linebacker moving forward. And while I do think he should, get some opportunities to be an edge rusher, I would like to see, this team adding another young, sturdier pass rusher to line up across from Tack, and maybe, ideally get a guy that can maybe not, Beasley's probably a bad choice, but like Claiborne, I guess. A guy that can play Claiborne's role, play inside and outside, but also allow them to let Beasley play a little bit more linebacker, where I feel like maybe, just maybe, he can help solve some of these issues and the nightmares I keep having every time I watch the Falcons linebackers play football. But
so you're saying you want someone along the lines of like a Michael Bennett so that Beasley can be that Bruce Irvin?
So it's really replacing Claiborne, but like it's killing two birds with one stone. You're replacing both guys.
It's upgrading Claiborne.
Yeah.
I like it. Because then you could also have Tack come in, play left or right, and then if Beasley's going to have his hand in the dirt, it's going to be obvious pass situations, or they're going to have basically Beasley out there for only specific strong side linebacker, or they're going to run like 3-3-5. I kind of like the idea of running 5 if you have these nickel situations, especially if you have Beasley and Campbell out there, because then you don't know the pushing.
There you go. Jalen's last question is, what can the people expect of the Falcons offense against a porous New England defense?
Hopefully they get their shit together, they get back on track, and then, I don't know, the Falcons defense plays the way that the Falcons defense can play. The Falcons offense can play that the way that they're supposed to play, and they get 45 points and are like, you know what, fuck you guys, we're going to, pardon my language, but basically screw you guys, like, we're making up for this game because we don't feel like dealing with the New England Patriots anymore. We're tired of this narrative, and they win like 45-20. That'd be the ideal situation.
Yeah, like I want to see them pound the Patriots defense into the dust. I want Devontae to come out of this game with like 135 yards. I want Tevin Coleman to have, a cool 11 carries for 89 yards or whatever it is. Don't throw even Teron Ward. Get Teron Ward two carries for 7 yards or something like that. So, like, yeah, I want to see them run the football. I hope that that's something that they can do, control this game, help out their defense a little bit going against that Patriots offense, because we know the Patriots can, the Patriots were the team that originated the formula for beating the Falcons, which is wear them down, force them, to tire out and take advantage in the second half. Miami and Buffalo have followed that formula the last 2 games. So, yeah, I want the Falcons' offensive line to control this game, unlike they did in the Super Bowl. I want them to be able to run the ball. I want Devontae to have a performance in both halves of the games like he had in the first half of that Super Bowl. So, yeah, that's what I'm hoping we'll see, just a strong running game. We'll dial up some shot plays off the play action. Maybe Derek Coleman will get more than 5 friggin' snaps, and they can sort of utilize his presence on the field to sell the run and sell the play action a little bit better. But, yeah, that's what I'm hoping we can expect.
Yeah.
Johnny's Bins, can we please whoop the Patriots' ass? Sure, Johnny. Sure.
I think that the Falcons can. It's not a matter of can they do it. It's a matter of will they do it.
Yeah, exactly. We'll see. This team has a habit of surprising us when it comes to, we thought this past week's game was going to be not a cakewalk, but a game that they shouldn't really break a sweat against too much. And that was not the case. Well, it looked like the case for 2 quarters. And so now that they're reeling a little bit, I'm hoping that they will come out and surprise us and put together a really good football. I'm hoping that we can sit there and say, oh, they lost to the Dolphins because they were looking ahead to this Patriots game. They were looking ahead to whoop the Patriots' ass, and they go out and do that. So hopefully that will be the narrative on Monday.
That would be the ideal narrative for Monday.
All right, our last question comes from Evan Birchfield. Score prediction for New England and Atlanta.
I'm going to be optimistic and say Atlanta 35, New England 31.
Okay, that's good. It's a good choice. Let's go Falcons 31, Patriots 30.
A real nail biter there, huh? We win by an extra point on Matt Bryant's leg.
Yeah, I'm thinking Matt Bryant hits the game-winning field goal to pull the some symmetry on the score, and then we get the win. So, all right. That's it, guys. We appreciate everybody for tuning in for this extra show. Shout out to Brian Phillips on Patriots Central Radio, Matt LePan as well. Wish he could have been with us. But you can check out one of us. Scott and I will figure out if one of us or both of us will be on Patriots Central Radio tomorrow night. You can check that out on YouTube, on Facebook as well, at 9 o'clock on Wednesday. You can get all the updates at profootballcentral.com, just like you can on this show. If you want to check out us on iTunes, you can subscribe to the links there. PFC Radio is the iTunes station that you can find us on. Also, check us out on YouTube. Give us a like, a thumbs up, all that type of stuff. Falcon Central Radio on Facebook. If you want to send in your mailbag questions to have answered on next week's show, use the hashtag Falcons Mailbag. My Twitter handle is @FalcFans. Scott is @KarasicS. The show's Twitter handle is FalconsPFC. You guys know what to do. We'll be back next week, hopefully talking about a Falcons win over the Patriots. And finally, people can get that monkey off the back that they've been trying to claw off for the last 8 months.